became interested in the back, the spine, and back pain, as a result of my own experiences with that. Yeah. Okay. So, what to say about the spine? So, if we take this idea that humans are vertical in gravity, and that has great significance, then it's very interesting to look at the structure of the spine in relation to that significance, right? So, fundamentally, the spine is an expression of the evolutionary difference between humans and other animals. And this is, I think, something that's quite interesting to study, because, of course, we're evidently mammalian, yet I would argue that actually humans represent a shift into another typology of embodied consciousness, sentient existence, that's as important as the shift from, say, unicellular creatures to insectoid creatures, or the shift from insectoid creatures to reptilian, or the shift from reptilian to mammalian. I think the shift from mammalian to human is actually highly, highly significant. So what physiological evidence is there to support that thesis? Well, I think a chimpanzee uses, 7% of its metabolic energy to feed its brain. Right? Chimpanzees got a brain. They're fairly closely related to us from an evolutionary point of view. I think they use 7% of their energy for their brain. And I think dolphins use it's maybe 8% or 9%. Humans, and those are the closest species to humans in terms of how much of their metabolic resources have to feed the brain, have to feed the whole system up there. And by metabolic resources, we mean everything you extract from your food, and glucose supplies, and oxygen supplies, and so on. A human being feeds about 25% of its energy to its brain. That's such a dramatic difference compared to the nearest species to us. It's very, very dramatic. But at the same time, as we're feeding all this energy to our brain, we're vertical, which is crazy, right? Because really, shouldn't we be upside down? We're going to feed that much energy to our brain. We should be like head down, feet in the air, so that it's easy for gravity to feed blood into our brain. This orientation of the human vertical, and yet at the same time sending all its energy upwards, sending the metabolic resources upwards, I think is significant and part of the expression of why verticality is an evolutionary shift on horizontality relative to gravity and the planet Earth. So if we look at the spine, the Chinese analyzed the spine fairly scientifically back around 2,000 years ago at the time of the writing of the Neijing. Now, the Neijing is the original book of Chinese medicine. It's actually where 90% of Chinese medicine comes from, really. It's a really long book. It's I think it's probably the longest ancient book that we have extant at this point. It was written, nobody really knows when, but best guess maybe 200 BC. But obviously portions of it were probably written prior to that, and probably a lot of it was oral transmissions that go back, to 2,500. Not, did I say? I said that wrong. Excuse me. It was written 200 BC. Did I say that? Or did,
yes.
Yeah. So some of it probably goes back to 500 BC around then. It's an ancient book. So when the Chinese were looking at the spine back at the time of the writing of the Neijing, they noticed that there are 25 vertebrae. Now, what does that exactly mean? Well, what they were doing was they were counting the contiguous bones, right? Today, with modern anatomical studies, for example, we know that there are 5 fused vertebrae in the sacrum and 4 fused vertebrae in the tailbone, for example. But they weren't counting those. They were just looking at what is continuous bone versus what is the disc space in between the bones. And so the tailbone and the sacrum counts as 1, right? So when you start to add up all of the vertebrae where the tailbone and the sacrum is 1 bone, because it's a continuous bony structure, and then you've got your 5 lumbar vertebrae and your 12 thoracic vertebrae and your 7 cervical vertebrae, that makes 25 vertebrae, right? Now the number 25 is actually somewhat significant for the ancient Chinese, because it represents a movement of yang energy. For example, at another place in the Neijing, there's a description of the circulation of the qi as it moves through the channels of the body, and it's described as moving through the channels 50 times in a 24-hour period, about 28 minutes per cycle. 50 actually and 25 as a numerological kind of marking point had significance for the ancient Chinese and also for the Vedic knowledge from India. And so one of the understandings about the functioning of the spine from an energetic point of view is that the yang energy in the body is rising up the spine, because that's what yang energy does. Yang energy is that energy which moves upwards, right? And so you've got these 25 gradations of energetic distinction going up the spine. And where you get to the midpoint is also, quite significant, because obviously the midpoint is going to be around the 12th vertebra when you count up, which is going to be around T7. And as we get into the description of the energetics of T6 and T7, I'll explain to you why that is actually so highly significant. So the Taoists, looking at the energetics of this movement of energy up the spine, started aligning the spinal vertebrae with different hexagrams from the I Ching in a progression up to around T6, T7, and then a different progression from T6, T7 further up the body. That fundamental distinction of two phases of energy in the spine, I think, is highly significant. But I'll get to it a little bit more later. Now, if we look at the modern anatomical analysis of the vertebrae of the spine, we see that there's 32 in reality, right? Because you've got 7 cervical vertebrae, and then you've got 12 thoracic vertebrae, so that makes, what, 19? Yeah. And then you've got 5 lumbar vertebrae, that makes 24. And then you've got 5 fused sacral vertebrae, that makes 29. And then you've got, is that right? Am I doing my math right? And then you've got 4 fused coccygeal vertebrae, that makes what, 33? Did I say 32? I meant 33. So if we actually analyze the spine from that point of view, we see 33 vertebrae. And that's, to me, interesting too, because it relates, I think, to something that is expressed in Vedic philosophy. And if you get into the works of Meher Baba, who's one of the great spiritual masters of the 20th century, for sure, Meher Baba talks about how there are 32 evolutionary stages of human development. It's kind of interesting, isn't it? I think it may relate easily to the fact that we have 33 vertebrae. That you could maybe think about those vertebrae as representing evolutionary passages in human development. And I'm going to suggest a schemata about how that works. My understanding of the spine is that all of the stages of sentient evolutionary embodiment are encoded in the spine. So what exactly do I mean by that? Well, according to lots of spiritual sources, we go through reincarnative stages. We go, the sentient existence on this planet goes through different stages, and we're all evolving. We're all continuously evolving, lifetime to lifetime, and so if we analyze those stages, I'm going to give you a breakdown on those stages, and this is just kind of came out of my own experiences and my own understanding. Actually, it didn't. I can't even say it came out of my own experience and my own understanding. All I can really say is that I was given a lot of information as a result of, I think, doing Qigong for 30 years and then doing a lot of shamanic practice for 15 years. At a certain point, when I was in an extreme point of suffering, I just was given a lot of information. And so one of the pieces of information I was given was about the structure of the spine. So I'm just going to outline that for you.